The main thing to do is to be able to see everybody as human beings, see our joint vulnerabilities and our shared goals and move towards them. There's hope in that. Actually, I want to thank you because I had to learn Latin in school. I was educated by Catholic nuns, but we only studied Tacitus, not Seneca.
Oh.
And as a result of knowing I was going to talk to you, I went and looked up some of the things from Seneca, and I really liked it a lot. And I felt like I could just see all kinds of connections with our work in the Hold Me Tight groups and things, and the book we do for the public, and also in our therapy work with emotionally focused therapy. So.
Well, I do think there's a lot of connections, and I have personally gone to EFT, so I've benefited from it quite a bit myself.
Have you? Oh, that's amazing. I'm so glad.
Yeah, my wife and I did EFT focused couples counseling.
Hey, that makes me feel so good. I just can't believe on some level that our work, it felt like for a long time that we were, that I was talking and my colleagues were talking and nobody wanted to hear. And I felt like I kept saying, hey, you guys, we've cracked the code of love. There's this amazing attachment science. We've got a map. Hey, guys. And everyone was like, no, go away. No. And so now I'm floored when I meet somebody like you and you say, oh, yes, I know EFT. I'm floored. I was on a beach. Where was it? I can't remember, Belize. This man came up to me and said, you are the woman who wrote that book, Hold Me Tight. And I said, yes, but actually it wasn't terribly good because he was mad. He said, you're the woman who my wife reads this book to me and I have to listen. And I say, oh, I'm so sorry. But it's neat. We now have, somebody told me just this morning, we now have 91 centers associated with our institute that train therapists and teach therapists our stuff all over the world, from Iran, can you believe Iran, Egypt, Finland. The Finns are very introverted. Yeah. So to be able to give them something that they, will actually sort of say, yes, all right, we might consider this is something. Anyway.
Well, let's start there, because I think at first glance, it might seem like emotionally focused therapy and Stoicism are at complete odds with each other, because people think Stoicism means has no emotions or stuff down and suppress the emotions. And then they might hear emotionally focused therapy and think it's, I don't know, some stereotype where they put you in a room and you scream as loud as you can. Or
catharsis.
Yes, exactly. But both of those stereotypes are totally off the mark in my experience.
Yes, they are. And I think a better way to think of it is, if you honor your deepest emotions, which are ingrained into your nervous system, if you honor your deepest emotions and you understand them and you can order them and you can get into balance with them, you're more connected with yourself and you can take the risk of connecting with other people. And this is about the creation of emotional balance. It's not about catharsis. Comes from a Latin word, that means diarrhea. So I think you're right, though. You're saying something quite profound, which is that I think our culture in general and my profession, psychology, distrusts emotion and only sees it as somehow, well, the thing about emotion is it's fast and it's terribly powerful. So, they just see it as a kind of problem. But I think, I actually think Seneca, if I sat down and talked to Seneca, wouldn't that be wonderful? If I sat down and talked to Seneca, I would say to him, Seneca, actually, all the new research says there's nothing at all irrational or illogical about emotion. It's how we deal with it that's the problem. And he would say, "Oh, Sue, that's very well." What would he? I don't know. He'd probably say, "I don't know." He might say, "Go away," but he might
I'm
say,
not going to talk about these things with a woman. He'd probably say something like that.
Yes, unfortunately. Excuse me, that's still alive and well in some places.
Unfortunately,
I hate to tell you, yes. I've had the privilege of my work is used extensively by the U.S. Army and by the Canadian Army, which pleases me very much. But I've had the privilege of going and actually doing hold me tight groups based on my books with very high up officers in the U.S. military, and their basic take on emotion was, "Hey, I got to keep my stiff upper lip." I'm English, I know about that one. Stiff upper lip, ma'am, ma'am, why do you think I should do this? Right. And I can tell them. And actually that work we did there was very powerful, and I was honored to be able to do it. And it ended up in the New York Times, which was great.
Oh, interesting.
Yes,
I mean,
it was.
I think people, the way I understand it as the two coming together is, if you think that Stoicism is about suppressing the emotion, that's only going to work for a certain amount of time. You can stuff it down, but eventually it explodes outward. And so actually, if the point of Stoicism is to not be driven by or ruled by your passions, then actually the only way to do that effectively and sustainably is to explore them, understand them, deal with them, so that one has the ability to say, hey, I'm not going to go into a jealous spiral here. I'm not going to lose my temper on this person. I'm not going to do X, Y, or Z. But you have to understand where that's coming from and why. You call this the dance in your work. Like, yes. I have to understand the dance that's about to happen, and then I can either participate or not participate.
Hey, you should come and teach EFT with me sometime, or do a hold me tight group. Absolutely. And I think that's right. I think what our work does is it says, let's listen, let's befriend these emotions, let's listen to them, let's look at them, let's walk into them and through them. And then when you have that kind of balance, you can turn to, instead of saying to your partner, "Why do you always say this to me?" or "I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm just not going to feel this." Yeah. Instead of shutting down or going to a rage, neither of which helps your partner see you or come close to you or support you. Instead of doing those things, you can walk into your emotions and say, "I'm getting triggered right now because when I try to talk to you about this and you turn your back on me, my whole body tells me that I'm not important to you. And when I say that to myself, I can't breathe. And you're right, I get incredibly angry. And I need to tell you that there are times when I'm unsure about how much I matter to you. And that's very hard for me to say." And my experience all through the years and all our research studies, we have 20 positive outcome studies. I think it's fair to say we've changed the field of couple therapy and couple intervention, and we get incredible results. I mean, we see people have what we call these core bonding conversations. They understand how their emotions kind of lead them down the rabbit hole. They understand how they scare each other, and they're able to look at the dance they're in, and then they're able to touch their deeper emotions and share them in a way that pulls the other person close. And when they do that, the power of those conversations still, after all these years, blows my mind. These bonding conversations, it's like our brain is wired, our nervous system is wired to say, "That matters. Stay with that. That's good stuff. That's what you need for survival." So I think we've come a long way actually in understanding emotions, love. The only thing that I found was kind of weird when I read a little bit about Seneca was he said somewhere, not exactly an expert on, you are, but I'm not. So I think he said somewhere that the main problem was anger, which I thought was interesting. And I could see how he would think that. From my point of view, working with couples all these years and also working with individuals, we're working more and more with individuals now in EFT, especially traumatized individuals. If you had to push me, I would say, well, I think the main issue is really how people deal with their fear, how they deal with their vulnerability.
Sure.
So that's sort of, and I think Seneca might say, yeah, because it seems to me from some of the things he said, he thinks that you need to turn and look at your vulnerability, not deny it.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about who Seneca was writing to, because sometimes he's writing these letters, sometimes he's writing these essays, but he's the advisor to Nero. If you can imagine all of the pupils to get stuck with, he gets stuck with Nero, and I think it makes sense if you think about being in a position of supreme power, of having the power of life and death over other people, where you're making these decisions that affect millions of other people. Anger would be such a core emotion that you have to figure out how to keep not even suppress, but you have to understand when you're feeling it, why you're feeling it, be able to process it, and do your best not to make decisions out of that anger, because he has a line in his essay on anger. He's saying, like, look, ordinary people can start fights and get in arguments and do these things, but he's like, that's a luxury not afforded to a leader, because you have to be bigger than a lot of these things, because so much is depending on you.
Isn't that a fascinating point of view in our current world?
Yes.
Our whole world seems to be exploding. The idea that a leader should be able to regulate their emotions, not get stuck in, let's not just stay with anger, not get stuck in fear of not looking the strongest, or fear of somehow feeling smaller, or whatever that is. Seems to be so much fear in the world right now, not getting stuck in that and being able to keep your balance and look at things like the common good.
Yes.
There's another man that I read that I don't know how to say his name. Is it Epicletus or
Epictetus?
No wonder I couldn't say it. Epictetus. Okay. Well, he said something about we should recognize that we all come from a common source.
Yes.
And I think attachment science says, hey, we're all different, but we're all the same. We all have the same longings. We all have the same fears. We all need love. And that's not sentimentality. Actually being able to turn to a safe other is the best survival strategy we have in this life. For example, emotional isolation predicts the effects of trauma more than any other variable. So, we're really starting to understand that some of the cliches around love are true. Love grows us. Love is our source of support, right? Yeah. But I understand that, I think a leader needs to be able to have that bigger perspective and move into, okay, what's happening here? A bit like my couples do in their hold me tight classes or in their therapy. They can stand back from I'm enraged or I'm going to shut down and shut you out. They can move into what's happening here. We're in this dance. We're triggering each other. I'm getting triggered. What's happening with the trigger? And is this the dance we want? But you have to be able to take a meta perspective to do that. So at first, when people who've been told love is impossible, it's a mystery and nobody knows how to do it. My parents certainly believe that, love is, and they adored each other and they basically destroyed each other, mostly in front of me, which is probably why I created EFT and wrote Hold Me Tight. And that was an interesting thing because my father was a very strong man. He went through World War II. He was very strong. The one thing he never could deal with and never did deal with was my mother up and leaving him. So, I think all of us, and particularly leaders, need to be able to have this emotional balance. Hard to come by.
Yeah.
The present world. Hard to come by.
I was just thinking of the dance and leaders, and you raise an interesting point there. In my book on stillness, I talk about Kennedy and the missile crisis. Here's this moment where a world leader, Khrushchev makes an unprovoked, dangerous bit of escalation, an act of aggression. He puts missiles on the island of Cuba. Now, there's reasons he thinks that this is the right decision.
Yes.
And there's reasons that Kennedy knows it's an untenable change. And so Kennedy has to realize how to respond, but he also, I think, quite brilliantly realizes that he and Khrushchev are in a dance. Game theory is kind of an example of the dance that you talk about, which is, if I do this, they will do this. And if they do this, then I will do this. And he realizes just how terribly and quickly this can spiral out of control to everyone's detriment. And I think, what I've taken from emotionally focused therapy is understanding, okay, I've reached out and they're pulling away. This is the dance that we have, or vice versa. And so now I want to pull away and then they want to reach out. And that ends up in a bad place very quickly. And the reason a leader has to understand this and also be able to be the bigger person is that's the only way that you stop that dance from leading to a place of destruction or death or worse.
Yes. And I think that the scary lesson in that, when I look at it and when I look at couples and how, is that if you cannot stand back, get your emotional balance, listen to your own vulnerability, imagine the other person's or the other power's vulnerability. If you cannot do that, the dance gets its own momentum.
Yes.
It does you. And when you look at the way wars start, and when you look at conflicts in general in intimate relationships and also between countries, I mean, there's a certain point where the process, the one that we know in our world is the sort of macho thing of, oh yeah. I mean, it's happening right now in Ukraine, and the trouble with that one is it's like a rabbit hole. People get caught in it in their intimate relationship. I've heard couples say the craziest things I supervised one where these couple were both terribly traumatized because a lot of our clients were fighting depression and anxiety and PTSD, as well as couple distress, and the isolation they felt in their relationship was just making everything worse. But I remember one couple having an argument about who was going to commit suicide first.
Wow.
And it was really about threatening the other person. You're just like, well, I'll go upstairs and take pills. Well, no, because I'll go out into the kitchen and hang on, guys. Let's just take a deep breath, which I think Seneca would approve of. Let's just take a deep breath and look at the dance you're caught in. And our experience is when we help people do that and they don't feel blamed or silly, they know we have a map to their longings and their fears. They know that we're all totally vulnerable in relationships because we're human, not because we're weak or immature, right? When they know that, and they can, and someone helps them see that dance and how they're pushing their partner away and everybody's hurting. Human beings, we're a little crazy and we're also completely brilliant. Human beings have the ability to say, yes, okay, I see it. I see how the way I deal with my emotions, the signals I send to myself and out into the world keep me stuck, keep you stuck, keep us stuck. I see it. Okay, let's put on another pair of glasses. Let's see how we're terribly alike. Let's see how vulnerable we both are, how we both want to be seen, heard, listened to. And I think this matters in leadership. I don't know if you put it in your book, but my wonderful colleague in Israel, Mario Michelanza, who's an attachment scientist, and our stuff is all based on the attachment science. Mario did this amazing study with the Israeli military, can't remember where he published it now, but basically looking at leaders. And he found that when leaders were what he called secure, which meant that they could do just what we're talking about. They could tune into their emotions. They weren't controlled by them. They could have balance, right? They were able to see other people's emotions. They could keep their balance, look at the dance that people were caught in. When you had secure leaders, the recruits who went through the training in the Israeli army the groups were more cohesive. They were more cooperative. The soldiers ended up more skilled. They felt more competent. And they did not have so many breakdowns and so many people just exiting because they couldn't stand the stress. So the soldiers felt more confident and competent. They learned their skills. The teams were better teams. And this came from the leader having this sense of balance. And of course, in couples therapy, the therapist is the leader. So, we train therapists to not just be skilled, but to see things from a particular perspective and to see other human beings from a particular perspective, that we understand people's vulnerabilities. And we also understand that you don't have to be taken over by them.
Well, one of my favorite passages at the beginning of Meditations, this is Marcus Aurelius's great work, which I think you would love. I'll read this passage to you. You can tell me what you think of it, because I think it captures the full scope of what you're talking about. He says, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I will deal with today will be meddling and ungrateful and arrogant and dishonest and jealous and surly. But he says, they are like this because they can't tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own, not the same blood or breath, but the same mind and possessing a share of the divine. And so none of them can hurt me. No one can implicate me in ugliness, nor can I feel angry at my relative or hate him. We were born to work together like feet and hands and eyes, like two rows of teeth, upper and lower. To obstruct each other is unnatural. To feel anger at someone, to turn your back on him, these are obstructions.
Well, that's fascinating, and I love it, except the only bit that I think is a bit naughty is when he says none of them can hurt me, because unfortunately that isn't true. I think, and then we get into the old idea of Stoicism, which you talked about, which is that Stoicism is something to do with denying your emotions, which I don't think it is, and you don't think it is.
I think the Stoics, what they do, though, is they make a distinction between hurt and harm, and sometimes they use them interchangeably. I think his point isn't that someone can't say something mean to you, but his point is that external things can only harm us if we choose to accept that we have somehow been deprived of something or lost something, right? So like Epictetus, for instance, talks about how taking offense requires two people, right? That we choose to be offended. And so I think his point is not that people aren't going to do things that quote unquote hurt, but we have this ability to decide, hey, they didn't mean to do it. I actually haven't lost anything. My character remains intact.
Wow.
And so therefore I haven't really truly been harmed by this.
Yeah. See, but that you said something really interesting. You said my character remains intact. Our attachment science says, and our experience with all these couples over the years says that's right. If you have a secure sense of self, which you get from having at least one good relationship in your life where somebody's been a safe haven for you and treated you like you really mattered and you were precious. And some of us have not had that. But if you have that secure sense of self, I think you can be attacked or be challenged or whatever we like. We're all terrified of rejection and abandonment on some level. I think you can have those things happen, and you can still see the humanity in the other person. You can still see, oh, we're caught in a dance. They were triggered by what I just said, and you can almost you can see it. You can even have your feelings hurt, and you can still have a sense of. You can order it, you can make sense of it, and you can still have some choice about what you do next, right?
Yeah.
The tricky part is that if you don't have that, unfortunately, we get caught in fight and flight. And I was trying to think of to make it concrete, a personal example, like in COVID, I don't think she'd mind me saying this. My daughter decided that she wasn't going to get vaccinated. Oh. And the whole family went kind of nutty, including me. And I was having a health problem at the time. So the whole family sort of basically said, you're not taking care of mom. Me. And, and you can imagine the sort of labels, and everybody got very threatened, and the dance started. And I got mad, and she shut down, and then I shut down, and then I said, fine, I don't care, which is nonsense, of course, because otherwise I do care, otherwise I wouldn't be getting so hot. But I hadn't read Seneca, but I do know about attachment science, and my couples have taught me a lot. So I was able to step back and say, hang on. This isn't really about, what are these arguments about rights? This isn't about rights. Why am I so triggered? Oh, I'm triggered because I'm a human being. This person matters to me, and I feel abandoned. Yeah. I feel like what I wanted her to say was, oh my goodness, Sue, you're sick right now. Of course I'll get vaccinated just in case I hurt you. I can put my principles aside. That's what I wanted her to say. Yeah. So then I was able, having got some emotional balance in me and looked at my vulnerability, I was able to see, my goodness, she's been attacked all over the place by the whole family. Of course she's going to build her walls and start ranting on about rights. And, of course she is. That's what I do too, And so I was able to step past it, which I think is what Seneca is trying to say. He's trying to say, you don't have to be controlled by these inner feelings. But, the more you know them and befriend them, the more control you have over them, and I was able to reach, which takes courage, and Seneca talks about that somewhere too. I was able to reach and say, hey, see the dance we're stuck in. Look at what's happening. I think we're both hurting. I think you feel rejected. I feel abandoned. Shall we talk? Because I don't really care about the arguments about vaccination. I care about you being willing to come and find a way to come and see me, like I matter. And then same thing happens in our couples. Then she said, oh, see, now we're playing a different game. We're listening to different music. The dance has changed. Then she said, oh, well, of course I want to see you. And I said, well, I said, well, then how can we do this? And we came up with a very simple thing, which is, she'd come to see me regularly. And before she came to see me, she'd take a COVID test. Right. Yeah. But, our family had gone into whatever you call it, the stuff that starts wars, blaming, pointing fingers, shutting down. A relationship death spiral. Yes. You see, you should write books on relationships. That's right. That's right. A relationship. I've seen so many of those over the years, but couples have taught me that we're vulnerable, our emotions are powerful, but if we order them and understand them and accept them, we can move through them and find a place of balance. And in that balance, hopefully we do recognize that we're all the same. We're all human beings. We're all vulnerable. We trigger each other, and we can step past that to a place where we can say, I'm triggered, I'm threatened right now. I think you are too. Here we are together. So I think your quote that you lost, Marcus Aurelius, was really saying, hey, we have to understand all this in order to stand together. Yeah. Well, Epictetus, he says, and Epictetus is the philosopher that Marcus Aurelius gets turned on to as a young man. So it's kind of this incredible dichotomy that the emperor of Rome is reading the philosophy of a slave, and they're influencing each other. Oh, I love that.
But Epictetus says that our chief task in life is to separate things into two categories, things which are up to us and things which are not up to us. And so this Stoic idea of like, hey, I don't control other people, I control how we respond to other people. It's so basic, but at the end of the day, it's one of the ways through these conflicts. It's like, hey, I can't make this person do this thing. And part of the reason we're trapped in this spiral is that I really want them to do this thing because I care about them and I think X, Y, and Z, and I think they're making a mistake. But it's often when we're trying to make someone do something, or we're disappointed that they're not doing it the way we want them to do it, that I think kicks off so many of the dances that we're talking about.
You're exactly right. And when we get scared, and I think this is from 9 months to 90-year-old. I think people actually, one of the things about attachment science is people for a long time, till about the beginning of this century, insisted that it was all about mothers and children. And then the adult attachment science got going. And I think you're absolutely right. That's right. So, it's, and realizing that one of the ways we have of dealing with feeling vulnerable, feeling unsure, not sure of ourselves, feeling overwhelmed, confused, alone.
Yeah.
Alone is the big one. We're not wired for aloneness, for social isolation. One of the ways we have of dealing with it is to try and turn and control everything, and unfortunately, it's like everything else. Sometimes it works. If you're a manager of a small company and you can fire everyone, it'll work for a bit, not for long because they'll all undermine you, but it'll work for a bit. But in relationships that matter to us in particular, and even in global huge conflicts, it doesn't work because I try to control you. That threatens you. You resist me. The more you resist me, the more I try to control. And it goes on and on and on, and we're stuck, right? And you can't cooperate from that place. You can't. I remember way back when I was a graduate student, I was a crazy graduate student. Okay, when I look back now, I was insane, and I read every single book on couple therapy. And I remember this man who was considered the king of couple therapy at the time saying, "Well, you just sit and negotiate. You stay rational, you don't listen to your emotions, and you sit and negotiate." And I was a student, and it was very disrespectful. I couldn't help it. I just sat laughing, and he didn't appreciate it. And, I just said, "You're joking. Like, you can't, if you're all wired up into flight and fight, you can't negotiate. This is the whole point. You have to be able to tune into that vulnerability and do something positive with it. To cooperate, to negotiate, to be able to say, what's happening here? We've both got a problem, haven't we? Do we want this kind of fighting? Do we want this kind of conflict? We've got a problem, right? It's like, I don't know. It's, all things like threats of dropping nuclear bombs. You think to yourself, well, hopefully anyone can look at that and say, excuse me, nobody wins in that one. Yeah. There's no winners. We're all losers there. Unfortunately, I actually think that these dances of threat and counter-threat and trying to control people, they can get so huge that I don't know. I don't know whether it's iffy. We could even make crazy mistakes that we could destroy ourselves, basically.
Well, that's one of the things that Khrushchev, sort of waking up to what he'd done, ends up writing to Kennedy. He says, we're both pulling on the rope of war and the knot is getting tighter. And he says, at some point, the only way through it is to cut that rope. And I think that's, you each think, hey, I'm insisting on what I think and what I'm, and it's just getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And at a certain point, it's a lost cause.
That's right. Because the bottom line is that at a certain point, and I think we are learning this. I don't know if we're learning it fast enough. At a certain point, we have to recognize we're all interdependent, and we're interdependent with this planet, and we are not the controllers. There's some things in the Bible about The land was given to man, and it was given to man to use, and
dominion over the animals. Yeah.
Yes, and it's often interpreted like we're the reason the earth exists. We're the kingpin, and we can basically do what we like. I think we're waking up to the fact, no, not only are we part of this planet, and we need this planet, and we need to respect and honor and cooperate with the planet and take care of it. It's true with each other. We need each other. I mean, look at what's happening now. There's a war in Ukraine, and suddenly people are starving in Africa. When I read that, I thought, what? And I said something to my husband, really stupid, like, but Ukraine's a long way from Africa. Just looked at me and, right, dumb, right? Like, because, we need each other. And attachment science says our essential essence as human beings, we are social, bonding animals. We need connection. We need connection to survive, to cooperate, to work together. It's about survival. And, this emotional sense of connection with other people isn't sentimentality. It's the biggest survival code built into our bodies, and we have to listen to it. So I think it's amazing. It gives me hope that Khrushchev, who must have had lots of pressure on him, I guess, to be the big, macho dude in control. I think that's incredible that Khrushchev could actually say to Kennedy, hey, we're both stuck here. Hey,
he's the one that started it. You know what I mean? Like, for him to come to that and realize, that he was a part of that process, that they were both complicit in it. To me, that's what you're talking about in a emotionally focused therapy, is it doesn't really matter why the dance started. It's who first realizes, oh shit, we're doing it again. Let's see if we can unwind this.
Yes. I think it's sometimes hard for people to acknowledge how powerful the dance is. I've done so many research studies. I must have watched thousands of tapes of people fighting and bonding and so much. And what I remember is being appalled that my mother, with whom I had a very conflictual relationship, would arrive from England, and I would talk to myself all the way to the airport, and I would say all the things we're saying to each other. And I would feel in control and balanced, and she would come down at the airport, down the road, and down the escalator, and we'd be standing waiting for her luggage. And before her luggage arrived, she would look at me and say something like, I don't know why you wear that color. That color really doesn't suit you. And oh my God, what have you done to your hair again? And we'd be off. And the dance would start. I'd turn, I'd be like somebody with my back to the wall. I'd turn and make some savage, sarcastic remark, right? She'd reply in the same thing. We'd shut down, move away from each other, and then 5 minutes later, we'd start again. And we did that until she got on the plane. And I remember being humbled by, and I think Seneca would agree with this, by the fact that my cognitive knowledge didn't translate, impeccably into me being able to manage this relationship with aplomb, because the fact of the matter was we'd fought each other for decades by that point. And we would have needed, actually, it's really sad. I wish we'd had some EFT. We could have gone and had some. Then I think we might have made it. I don't know.
One of my favorite lines in meditations from Marcus goes to what at least I'm trying to do as a parent, as a spouse. He says, you always have the power of having no opinion. And I feel like so much of the conflict in relationships, particularly with parents and children, seems to be rooted in the parents having opinions about stuff that's really none of their fucking business, to be perfectly honest. And that if they just kept to themselves, the relationship could continue as it was. You call it judgment, you call it opinion. What if you just didn't think about it at all and you focused on yourself? So I feel like so many relationships would just operate better.
Yes. I agree. When I find myself being judgmental about my kids, I do tell myself, let it go. There's none of your business. But sometimes it's hard. And usually if I pay attention to that trigger, right, which is part of ordering your emotions, and listening to them and using them as a compass, but not having them control you, if I pay attention, there's usually some sort of anxiety under there.
Yeah.
And so, unless it's something like one of my children just announced they were going to vote conservative.
Yeah.
And for me, that's very strange. So, but I did manage it. I said, oh, how interesting, rather than, well, you should listen to my political view. No, they don't have to, but usually there's an anxiety there. And I remember watching a father and son that we worked with, and the son was doing things. He was very young. He was only about 11. But whoa, this kid was bright. And he was doing things like picking up chairs and putting them through the TV and through the windows. And the father would order him, like he's in the army, go to your room, do this, do this. So it was very interesting where the kid said, all you are, you don't care about me. This was hard to get to, by the way, but we did get there. You don't care about me. All you do is order me around, tell me how I should be. And, with support from me, bless his heart, the father was able to say, I do that. I do order you around. I do. You're right. I do tell you what to do. I didn't have a dad. I really have no idea how to be a good dad to you right now. And your rages actually scare me. I don't know what to do with them. So you're right. I stand behind my wall and I tell you what to do. And I start supporting him and saying, that must be so hard to feel like somehow you don't know how to be a good parent and this is going wrong and not knowing how to fix it. And he starts to cry and he says, yes, he turns to his son and says, I don't know how to be a good dad to you right now. And I don't know what it is you need. And the kid, with a little bit of help, was able to say, I need you to come home and ask me how I am. I need to know you care. I need to know that I matter to you. I need you to take me out on Saturdays and play ball with me, and the father is amazed. He says, oh, you want me to do that? The kid says, yes, I want you to do that. So you watch this man who's never been parented, desperately trying to deal with his sense of failure as a parent, and the way he does it is to try and control everything his son does. You watch the son react to that. And then you watch them being able to talk about their triggers, come to a place of balance, and start to see each other. And the son was delightful. He used all these expletives from comics. I can't remember them now, like smackaroo and, who says that? I don't know. And he used all these incredible, when his father did something like said, well, I didn't know you wanted me to give you attention. And it breaks your heart. Sometimes people break your heart. What we don't see, we've all got our blind spots, but what we don't see. So I think it's great that Khrushchev and Kennedy could talk. I hope we still can do that. Isn't that what a full, mature human being can do? A full, mature, and this comes from attachment science, which tells us what real strength looks like. It's not denying vulnerability. It's being able to accept it and manage it and order it, and then turn and look at your impact on others and recognize your own needs and be able to, step back and have this perspective and say, oh, we're caught here, we're stuck here. What do we both want? What is the important thing? Wasn't there something about Israel and Egypt there was something that the people from Harvard they wrote a book called Getting to Yes years ago. They went and they helped Egypt and Israel make peace. And as I remember, it was something about the Sinai Desert. They were fighting over the Sinai Desert. And then when they could have these open, responsive conversations where they weren't listening to their fear all the time or their anger, they could actually say, well, I don't really care about the Sinai Desert, actually. And I think the other side said, well, no, neither do I. And I said, well, what are we talking about then? What's the issue here? So, what are our goals? And they found that they weren't incompatible at all. And that piece is held, which is interesting. It's, but I think Seneca in the end, wasn't he really trying to call for wisdom? He was trying to say, let's have an ideal about what healthy, mature human beings are and what they are capable of. Mind you, if he was talking to Nero, not sure how effective that was going to be, but wasn't Nero was quite a character, wasn't he? Yes.
He was deranged. Yeah,
he was deranged. So I don't think that's going to work. But, at least Seneca had an idea about what health and maturity look like. And so does attachment science. And, we see people in relationships not just improve their relationships and have them stay improved over years. We see them grow each other up, right? We see them because that is what happens in a good love relationship. A good love relationship helps you regulate your emotions, befriend them, understand your vulnerabilities, not feel ashamed of them, turn and share them with your partner in a way that pulls you close. We see attachment science, and our work in EFT shows us what resilient, mature a human looks like and how we can get there. And the main thing to do is to be able to see everybody as human beings, see our joint vulnerabilities and our joint shared goals, and move towards them. There's hope in that. As I say that to you, there's hope in that. Whereas these days when I read the papers, I don't know, there are times when you sort of think, my goodness me, we are descending into hopelessness.
A death spiral.
Yeah, I read a lot of Buddhism. I particularly like Pema Chodron, who's a Canadian Buddhist nun. I think she's wonderful. And I saw her last presentation. She's now 86. And I sat on Zoom and listened to her last presentation. And she said that the ancient Buddhist texts say that we are entering a 500-year period of darkness. And I thought, oh, great. I didn't need to know that. Thanks very much. and well, then I'm going to not believe, in the interests of not being able to control external events, but being able to control me, I'm going to decide I don't believe that, because that's too much.
Yes, if you didn't know, it wouldn't upset you, which I think is also a thing I try to practice in relationships and life. I try to go, if I had accidentally deleted this email before I read it, I would not know what's inside it. Then I would not be upset. And I would just be giving this person a chance to think better of the dumb thing that they sent me. And, the same is true for this random news story that I sought out, for no reason, is now making me convinced the world is about to end.
That's amazingly mature, Ryan. I think Seneca would be proud of you. I must say, I have tried to go there. I do manage it sometimes, but I'm afraid there are times when, you're right. I say to myself, if you hadn't read that phrase, or if you didn't say this to yourself when you woke up this morning, I think this morning I woke up and said, oh, I've had bad experiences with technology in the last couple of weeks with podcasts. Oh my goodness, it's all going to go wrong. And then I had my coffee and I thought, well, if you just don't say that to yourself, if you stop that story going on in your head, maybe it'll all work out. And it did. Unfortunately, I'm not quite as I can't quite reach your level or whatever.
I try. I didn't say I was good at it.
Oh, all right. Because unfortunately, we're human and we get triggered and I know that one of my triggers is that I feel that I and my colleagues have worked amazingly hard over the last 40 years to contribute to the world of relationships and contribute to psychotherapy. And occasionally, it feels like somebody will send me an email which implies that that's not true, or that we haven't done anything, or that we're somehow deluded, which is always possible, deluded or irrelevant. And I know that that's one of the emails that I do delete it often, but it's stuck in my, it's one of the places we all have sensitivities, right?
No, I think that's right. The last thing I was going to mention to you, because I listened to you on Tim Ferriss's podcast, who I know and love quite a bit. But you talked very movingly about Winston Churchill and his wife Clementine, who I have read a fair amount. And I actually just read a book about Winston's relationship with his son Randall.
Which was very bad, actually.
That the relationship was not good. Yes, you're right. It was just a reminder to me of the generational trauma that comes from poor attachment and not dealing with the emotions that we're talking about here.
That's right. Winston, the thing that fascinates me about Winston Churchill, I'm fascinated by him. The thing that fascinates me about him is he had a completely judgmental, hostile, distant father.
Yeah.
He had a completely, as far as I can see, indifferent mother. He probably had nannies. This is the secret. And John Bowlby, the father of attachment science, also had nannies. Okay. But, he was sent away to boarding school at Winston Churchill, and so was John Bowlby. This is, if you understand anything about attachment science, this is the very worst thing you can do to a young human being that needs connection with a few significant others to feel safe in the world. And it's always fascinated me that in spite of that, he grew up to be an amazingly brave and in many ways strong human being. However, I think the story you're saying is that he was so bonded with his wife that when they had fights, he used to sit outside her door, because they had separate bedrooms, of course, because, they used to English, right? So aristocracy. So he would sit outside her door and knock on it and say, "Aren't you going to come and talk to your Winnie?" And basically he'd plead for her to respond to him. And this is the fascinating thing about this man. He could stand up and create he could do what the man who's leading Ukraine is doing right now, too. I don't know if he's ever read Winston Churchill. He can basically stand up and say, no.
Yeah.
We don't care what you do. We say no, right? This is what we will do. And he could do that and take enormous physical risks. Brave. He used to stand up on the top of the buildings in London and watch the air raids come over, right? Watch the Nazi Luftwaffe trying to destroy London. So it fascinates me. He's a story of resilience, but I also think a lot has to do with the fact that he was very bonded with his wife.
Yeah.
But he was a terrible dad. That's the truth.
It's so hard to give what you didn't get. And I think that's the struggle that so many of us are on is, he was light years better than his parents, but that's not saying much.
No. How do you're like that dad I was talking about. How do you know how to parent? How do you know how to hold when you've never been held? How do you know how to read somebody's emotional cues when you've always felt completely unseen? How do you know how to talk about your emotions when you haven't even got names for them? That happens all the time right now. People come in and they say, a client I'm just working with in emotionally focused individual therapy comes in and says, "I'm depressed." Well, doctors have told her this for years. This is the phrase she uses. Well, actually, it's a big abstract label. When we go in, she was never seen, never listened to, never given words for her emotions. When we go in and take that apart, what we come up with is not depression. What we come up with is heartbreak. Ah, that's different. And it's not an illness. It's not a dysfunction. Heartbreak is what happens to human beings when they are never seen, never held. And heartbreak, you know what to do with heartbreak. You grieve it. You see the little broken child alone and you grieve it. And the adult self, her adult self, and I help her grieve it and hold that little child. And then everything changes, So yeah, you're right. We have to take a massive leap. So maybe we really need Stoicism. I think we really need everything. We really need Buddhism, Stoicism.
We need all the help we can get.
We need all the help we can get, yeah. Because I think we have to take a leap here. We have to stop being parents even when we've never parented. We have to stop talking about love as a mystery and start making positive, bonded relationships. And we have to translate that into more secure ways of dealing with people who disagree with us, a fragmented society, a chaotic society is a dysfunctional society. That's the truth.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help anybody. So, yeah, and we need a leap. So, so thank you for reminding me about Seneca.
No, I it's my pleasure. I'll give you one last quote from him as we close up. To go to the point of that we need all the help we can get. The writer that he quotes more than any other writer, the philosopher he quotes more than any other philosopher, is not another Stoic. It's not Aristotle. It's not Plato. He quotes Epicurus, which is interesting because they are theoretically rivals. They believe very different things. And he's asked, why do you quote Epicurus so much? Shouldn't you disagree with him? And he says, well, I read like a spy in the enemy's camp, right? I'll learn from anyone, he says. And then he says, and I'll quote even a bad author if the line is good.
I love that because I hate to tell you, but I do that too. I read, people who are very different than me. And actually, sometimes the other night I was struggling because I was all, pompous and thinking, this I'm going to, and I actually found a couple of lines I thought, that's really good. That's really good. Just get off it. So yes, let's learn. Let's learn from where did EFT come from? Hold Me Tight came from. It came from my clients, from all these couples we work with. Let's get together and learn from each other because we have to make a leap here. We have to make a leap into balance and wisdom, or I don't know what's going to happen. So it's been wonderful to talk to you, Ryan.
Likewise, and your work has helped me so much. I really appreciate it. I'm sure my wife agrees. So thank you very much, and thanks for taking the time.
You're welcome. Okay. Take care.